All rise.
I know.
All right, everybody take a seat. All right, welcome, family, friends, and special guests. I want to extend a warm welcome to the retired judges who are here. Judge Gilfillan, Judge Collier, Judge McDade, Judge Brandt, Judge McCuskey, Judge Eagleton, and Judge Nemenoff. And I heard Judge Perkins is here in the audience. And I want to thank the active judges who have taken time from their dockets to be here. We're here for the Peoria County Memorial Service. The records date back to 1911, and I want to thank Dave Miller, who's been an integral part of this tradition for years, and Stephanie Bittner with the Peoria County Bar Association and Court Administration. I'm sad to say, as my dad would say, we've lost some of nature's noblemen over the past year, and today is the day we celebrate their legacy and reflect on how fortunate we are to practice here in the 10th Judicial Circuit. And with that, I'll turn the program over to Dave Miller.
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, members of the judiciary, members of the Peoria County Bar Association, and friends and families of those whom we honor. The 17th century English poet John Donne described the passage of generations best when he said, "Send not to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee." I suggest that each of you take a moment to look at the program you received. It lists each of the members of our association who have been remembered in this service over the years. As you can see, this is the 112th continuous memorial service presented by the Peoria County Bar Association, a tradition of which we are rightfully proud. This is a good thing we do today. In paying tribute to our departed friends and colleagues, we reflect not only upon their lives and accomplishments, but also upon the gifts and good fortune which enable us to contribute to the rule of law and to our community. They are the blocks upon which we build. It is our responsibility to build the next level. A memorial will be given orally today and in written form will be spread upon the records of the Peoria County Bar Association. Today we honor Honorable Daniel L. Schmidt, Robert H. Miller, Jack B. Templitz, Brent H. Gwillow, Julian E. Cannell, John C. Mulgrew, and Timothy J. Newland. Following formal presentation of the memorials, the floor will be open to remembrances and reminiscences of those whom we honor by persons in attendance. The first memorial is presented for Honorable Daniel L. Schmidt by Honorable David K. Brown.
And, to the family and friends of Dan Schmidt, members of the judiciary, Peoria County Bar Association, and guests, may it please the court, Chief Judge Gorman. I'm grateful to the Peoria County Bar Association and to David Miller, chairman of the committee, for the privilege and honor of presenting this memorial resolution in honor and recognition of Daniel L. Schmidt. Dan died on July 5th of 2022 at home in Grillwood at the age of 71, following a 2.5-year battle with ALS. He was born January 12, 1951, to Robert and Jean Schmidt. He grew up just up the river in Chillicothe. He married Maureen Ritchie in Naples, Maine on August 1st, 1987, at the same place where his son would marry 34 years later. Surviving are his wife, Maureen, his son, Matt, Matt's wife, Emily, Dan's two brothers, Frank and Steve, and his golden retriever, Luke. Dan graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree from the University of Illinois before going to work as a police officer. He served Central Illinois as a sworn officer for a total of 9 years. He put himself through law school at Washington University in St. Louis, where he earned recognition as Order of the Point, National Honor Society, Order of the Barristers, and National Moot Court Honorary Organization. He practiced law for 19 years, representing clients in civil matters as defense attorney throughout the courts of the state of Illinois and the nation. In 2002, he was elected to the 3rd District Court of Appeals of Illinois, where he served until his death.
He was in Peoria for the last.
Extra feedback.
Yes,
Dan was a friend and colleague of the Peoria County Bar Association and the 10th Circuit for almost 40 years. He treasured his time practicing law in Central Illinois and serving in the judiciary. He particularly loved the PCBA Christmas party skits, and many of you will remember him as Devil Dan. He attended most 10th Circuit ceremonies, including a number of these memorial services. While he wasn't anxious to be memorialized, I'm certain that he's pleased that you're here today. Dan was a man of humble beginnings. As mentioned earlier, he grew up in Chillicothe, the third of 3 boys raised in a working class household. He often told stories of growing up in Chile, including working in one of the local gravel pits. You couldn't spend much time with Dan without hearing about his stories about working as a police officer as well. His family and those experiences clearly shaped who Dan was, how he viewed the world, how he viewed the law, and how he lived his life. Even though he was very successful as a trial attorney and then as a justice on the appellate court, he never lost sight of where he came from. Dan wasn't a proud man. He seldom boasted of himself or his many accomplishments, unless he was the first to shoot out of the duck blind in the morning. Tellingly, he liked to be called Dan, not Judge, Justice. As he would say, my mama didn't name me Justice. Although Dan had friends at the highest levels of government, the legal system, and business, and at times he literally rubbed elbows with the captains of industry. He never really got caught up in all of that. If not sitting next to his son Matt in the duck blind, he was just as likely sitting next to a business owner as he was someone who worked with his hands for an hourly wage, and probably preferred the latter. He certainly preferred the person who didn't bring a duck home to the blind. Any of you hunt a duck, you know what I'm talking about. While perhaps not too proud of himself, he was enormously proud of his family, proud of his son Matt and his accomplishments, including those on the soccer pitch, as a sporting play range, and his union apprenticeship and his wife Emily. He's proud of his wife Maureen and her career, his brothers Frank and Steve, although knowing Dan, I suspect they seldom heard his praises. Their love of Dan in his waning days was nothing short of remarkable. Maureen was no Nurse Ratchet, as Dan would often say. Dan was plenty smart. There weren't too many dummies that graduated with honors from WashU, But he didn't hold himself out as an intellectual. And he probably would have taken offense if someone accused him of being one. The term rapier wit, I think, is fitting for Danny. His mind was quick but cutting. His wit dazzling, but when wielded without caution, capable of cutting to the bone. As his family, law clerks, and colleagues on the third no doubt experienced. His writing style on the bench was a reflection of Dan, the person. Sometimes sarcastic, sometimes humorous, sometimes critical, but usually correct and almost always short and to the point, bordering on blunt. It's fair to say Dan was a unique person. He had an opinion on almost anything and everything and wasn't afraid to share it, even when it wasn't solicited. He had an unbelievable ability to recall jokes and seemed to have one for at least every occasion. His jokes usually made you laugh, even though you knew you probably shouldn't. In this era of political correctness, Dan had little concern for microaggressions, but his antics really weren't meant to be hurtful unless you were a close friend who could take it. Dan was also a storyteller. He loved to tell stories about trials against other attorneys, before certain judges, and about a great morning in the duck room. He had a taste for some of the finer things in life, a fine bottle of wine, a good cigar, bourbon off the top shelf, and perhaps above all else, conversation. Dan loved to talk. Dan served just shy of 20 years on the appellate court. He found his work on the court enjoyable, challenging, rewarding, but at times frustrating, if not maddening. He often found himself in the minority on many cases, and as a result, wrote numerous dissents, many of which received considerable attention from the bench, the bar, but also the Supreme Court. He certainly had a way of writing dissents. Unfortunately, in my mind, his time on the bench will probably be most remembered for his dissents. At the end of his life, he was a captive in his earthbound body. Due to ALS, he was virtually unable to talk, even though his mind was as sharp as ever. For a joke teller and a storyteller, it was a struggle and a frustration. He still had much to say. He managed to write about his experiences and share it with other folks struggling with ALS. Through it all, though, he maintained his sense of humor. Through Matt or Maureen, he could still get out one of his classic Danisms, such as, "In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king." Dan was a man of faith, and the Catholic faith fit him nicely. He could drink bourbon, smoke cigars, tell off-color jokes, and even occasionally curse. And then on Saturday afternoon, he and Mo would go to Mass, and he was forgiven. Or in his words, he punched his ticket to heaven. His faith, no doubt, helped him through his journey with ALS. I'm going to try to get through this. As we think of Dan, please humor me with a few wishes for Dan from the perspective of us still living. If we were allowed to raise a toast to Dan here in the courthouse, it might go something like this. May every morning break with the sun rising on a duck marsh with the ducks working. May every afternoon ease to close with the warm sun hesitating to touch the mountains on the far shore of Sebago Lake. May your evenings be full of camaraderie as you sit by a warm fire sharing bourbon and cigars with friends. And in the unlikely event a bonehead Democrat made her way through the pearly gates, may you have endless debates. Where Dan is now, he no longer needs to dissent. But something tells me he's still letting everyone know his opinion. Therefore, be it resolved, the membership of the Peoria County Bar Association expresses their deepest sympathy and sorrow on the passing of our colleague and friend, Dan Schmidt, as well as our appreciation for his life, his dedication to law, and his friendship. Be it further resolved that the Secretary of the Bar Association shall forward a copy of this memorial resolution to Maureen Schmidt, his wife, and his son, Matt. Respectfully submitted this 25th day of May, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Brown. I'm sure that we will all benefit from what I would refer to as Dan's blessing. We certainly appreciated his time with us. The next memorial is presented for Robert H. Miller by his son, Nathan.
Thank you, David. Your Honor, welcome to my family, both here and online, and to the friends, members of the judiciary, and guests present today. I'll first make a comment here. Any of you who knew my father won't be surprised at all to know that he actually wrote his own memorial resolution. He also had written an autobiography for himself and his obituary. So I'll be reading the resolution with a few of my additional comments included in it. I'm honored to present this resolution in memory of my father, Robert Hollis Miller. He was born in Peoria, Illinois on May 21, 1926. And he died in Tucson, Arizona on October 22nd, 2022 at the age of 96. He was the only child of Robert W. and Florence Seltzer Miller, and he grew up and attended public schools in Elmwood. After high school, he spent one semester in junior college before enlisting in the U.S. Navy in 1943. He was sent to Purdue University to participate in the Navy's officer training program known as V-12. It was there that he met Barbara Ann Walter, whom he later married on September 20, 1947 in Canton, Ohio. She died on August 5th, 2021. After graduating from Purdue and receiving his commission as a naval officer, Bob returned to civilian life. In February 1947, he entered the University of Illinois College of Law, where he became a member of the first class taught by Professor, later Dean, John Cribbett. Professor Cribbett launched the student law review known as the Illinois Law Forum, and Bob became the first student editor-in-chief of that publication. He fashioned a fine academic record in law school, being elected to the Order of the Coif and graduating at the head of his class in June 1949. Upon admission to the bar in January 1950, Bob began his legal career in Peoria with the law firm of Morgan, Pendarvis, and Morgan. After an 18-month tour of active duty with the Navy during the Korean War, Bob returned to the Morgan firm. In 1957, he was the youngest of 7 partners who formed Davis and Morgan and continued with that firm until its dissolution in 1989. Thereupon, he was one of the founding partners of the present-day firm of Miller, Hall, and Triggs, with whom he practiced until his retirement at the close of 1994. Bob's practice centered on probate, trust, real estate, and business and municipal law, and he acted as general counsel for Bradley University from 1979 until his retirement. His legal ability won him the trust of his clients and the respect of his peers, who installed him as president of the Peoria County Bar Association for the 1984-85 term. In 2010, he was inducted into the Pillars of the Bar Group by the members of the Peoria County Bar Foundation. He was also past president of Peoria Sertoma Club and Mount Holly Country Club, past chairman of Greater Peoria Family YMCA, and past member of Peoria Pre-Court Club Board of Trustees. He was a former member of Forest Hill United Methodist Church in Peoria and current member of Vista de la Montana United Methodist Church in Tucson at the time of his death. Bob loved sports, and he was active in golf and tennis in Peoria and Tucson for many years. He was a member of both Peoria foursomes, which won the annual Illinois Bar Association golf tournament in 1968 and 1971. He also won the golf tournament of the Peoria County Bar Association, and I teamed with him to win the Peoria County Bar tennis outing for several years. Thus, he is likely the only attorney to have won both the golf and tennis tournaments of the Peoria County Bar. After his retirement at the end of 1994, Bob and Barbara became winter snowbirds in Tucson and first occupied their new home in Sun City. They became permanent residents of Arizona in 2006, and in November of that year, they moved into the retirement community known as Splendido, where they remained for the balance of their lives and enjoyed many years. I was fortunate to practice with my dad for several years, and I'm thankful for that time together. While Bob's life and many achievements were impressive, I'm most proud that he was simply my dad. Bob's survivors include his 4 children, namely Dr. Vincent T. Miller of Hudson, Wisconsin, Jennifer M. Geis of Naples, Florida, who's here today, Jeffrey W. Miller of Eau Claire, Wisconsin, and Nathan R. Miller of Peoria, also 7 grandchildren and 12 great-grandchildren. Now therefore be it resolved that this presentation stand as a fitting memorial to the legal career and long life of Robert Hollis Miller, and we now ask the court to accept this resolution in order that it be made a part of the court's official records of its proceedings. With the court's approval, we will furnish a summary of these proceedings and a copy of the resolution to his immediate family. Respectfully submitted.
Thank you, Nate. The next memorial is for Jack B. Kaplitz, presented by Honorable Brian M. Demino.
First time in my life I wore a sport coat or a suit coat under that. Not a good idea. Thank you, David. Good afternoon, everyone. Family and friends of Jack B. Teplitz, whom we lost on December 8th of last year after a 5-month battle with cancer. Chief Judge Gorman, members of the judiciary, both active and retired, members of the bar, and guests. I am grateful to the Peoria County Bar Association and David Miller as chair of the committee for the honor of drafting and presenting this resolution in memory of my good friend, Jack. Jack Barra Teplitz, and that's Barra with 1 R, not like Yogi, was born to his parents in Chicago, Janet and Henry Teplitz. Sadly, I never met his mother, but had the pleasure of meeting Henry on several occasions. Henry could not have been more physically different from his son Jack. To be kind, was a sturdy man. Henry was short, thin, mildly wizened in his old age. Nevertheless, Henry had spunk, particularly at Chicago Bear games. I recall Jack trying in vain to get him out of the freezing weather near the end of a playoff game in the Super Bowl year. He would have none of it. Henry had waited over 2 decades for a playoff win, and he was not leaving. Jack grew up with 3 sisters, Myra Weiner, Rhoda Greenberg, and Ellen Millette. Jack's extended family had 11 tickets to the Chicago Bears starting in 1939. 9 of those seats were 2 rows higher and 5 yards nearer to midfield than the Bears' houses. In addition to the Bears, Jack was for his Cubs in a lineup. Even near death, in the hospice, he raised his fist celebrating an Illinois basketball win in the early season. After graduating from an accounting degree from the University of Illinois in and shortly thereafter, passing the CPA exams, he received his law degree from the DePaul University College of Law in Chicago. He was first hired by the United States Department of Justice, where he tried several matters in the Peoria Federal Court. While here, he learned of the opening in the city's Corporation Counsel's office. He applied and became Corporation Counsel through much of the 1970s. It was there that I began a nearly half-year century relationship with him. During his time as Corporation Counsel, he shepherded the Angelo Demetrio Downtown Redevelopment Plan from concept to reality. And I would add as a sidelight, when I was practicing this the last couple days, reminded me that recently this community lost Mayor Carver. Not here from Mayor Carver, and I don't know how many people in here remember Mayor Carver, but Jack and Dick Carver had a relationship that meshed. Dick had the ideas, Jack knew how to get them done. So when I was thinking of Dick's recent death, I was very melancholy but wistful. Among the more prominent projects included the Peoria Civic Center, the new Central Firehouse, the Southtown mixed-use redevelopments, a more sensible downtown traffic pattern for cars, the University of Illinois Medical School, and indoor parking facilities. Framework of these projects laid the groundwork for future projects, like the 1982 version of the Pierre Marquette, the Twin Towers complex, and the downtown minor league baseball stadium. He was the primary author of the Illinois tax increment financing statute and played a role in the litigation that validated the statute as lawful in front of the Illinois Supreme Court. Interestingly enough, 2 days ago, Peoria City Council adopted a $38 million TIF project to provide additional commercial and residential development in the warehouse district. Jack's pioneering efforts continue to bear fruit some 45 years later. He was a clever advocate for the city's position. By way of example, he hugely improved the ultimate amount of financial aid by the state to our civic center. The original State Support Act called for $8 million in grant. It further provided, more importantly, that any interest earned on those proceeds during the construction process would be returned to the state and not belong to the civic center. The Illinois Supreme Court struck that statute, calling it special legislation. Governor Walker's office asked Jack and lawyers for Springfield and Aurora to redraft the bill. A new bill provided for $20 million instead of $8 for our civic center. More importantly, Jack quietly struck that provision awarding the interest to the state. The statute became silent on that point. He relied upon something called the Investment of Public Funds Act, which provided an absence of a statutory indication. Contrary, the interest went to the body to whom the principal went. These actions led the Illinois Supreme Court to record the interest, which then was at 18%, to the various civic centers. Our share was $2.5 million. Pretty slick maneuver. In the late 1970s, Jack moved to private practice, representing developers in various cities, most notably Decatur and Normal. Excuse me. He saw to the development of the downtown hotel and convention center. By the time of his death, he was the state's leading authority on municipal finance. He was downstate's leading municipal authority on finance and redevelopment. I have 2 children, and Nathan. Nathan is an accomplished chef at some of Chicago's finest restaurants. Elena was a senior foreign service officer, which included overseeing the opening of the U.S. Embassy in Kabul, Afghanistan. Thereafter, she was the United States ambassador in Nepal, Sri Lanka, and the Maldives. She presently serves as an assistant secretary of state for the United States Department of State. And I suspect maybe for the first time in 106 years that there's a live stream of this service in the executive office of the United States Secretary of State. I would be remiss if I failed to relate the degree to which he mentored me early in my career. He trusted me with some important matters for which I remain proud. Without his trust, I don't think I ever would be in the position I am today. He gave me space while I was mediating. We became friends with two other people who were in prison for a total of 65 years. One of them was completely exonerated. The other was released 47 years after given a new trial. That person died without a conviction for murder. The stories could go on forever. Jack, rest in peace, my friend. Therefore, be it resolved that the membership of Peoria County Bar Association convey our deepest sympathy and sorrow on the passing of Jack B. Teplitz, as well as our appreciation for his life, dedication to the law, and his friendship. Be it further resolved that the Secretary of the Association shall forward a copy of this resolution to his family and spread the same on the records of this court. Respectfully submitted this day. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Nemeroff. The next memorial is presented for Brent H. Willem by Rex K. Linder.
May it please the court. The family and friends of Brent H. Willem, members of the judiciary, members of the Peoria County Bar Association, and guests. I am honored and grateful to the Peoria County Bar Association and to David B. Miller, chair of the Memorial Committee, and especially to the Willem family for the privilege of presenting this memorial resolution. Matter of my friend and partner, Brent H. Willem. Brent was an excellent lawyer. His entire career was spent in Palo Vista, Bucker, and Allen, and reflected not only his loyalty to the firm, but also his considerable talent and intelligence in his practice, in which he exhibited the highest ethical standards of our profession, coupled with congeniality and humor. Brent was born July 28, 1946 in St. Louis. He graduated from Alton High School in 1964, where he lettered in football. He then attended Bradley University, where he was a proud member of the Sigma Chi fraternity and quarterback on the Bradley football team. And no, he did not kill Bradley football. He was my pledge father in our fraternity and my roommate until he married Judy Kirkpatrick in December 1966. Back at that time, there was still hazing and personal servitude. So I asked Brent if I could shine his shoes one last time before the wedding. He said, oh, sure. I got his shoes and used the sole as dressing and wrote help on his left shoe and me on his right shoe. He should be held down at the altar. Following in his father's footsteps, Judge Harold Willem, Brent chose a career in law. After graduating from Bradley in 1968, he received his Juris Doctor degree from the University of Missouri College of Law. He spent his entire career at Palo Vista, Bucker, and Allen, and loved the practice of law. He also loved his coworkers, his partners, his support staff, and clients. His principal area of practice focused upon business, transactional matters, estate planning, and probate. To give you some idea of sense of humor of Brent Willem, at one time, our firm instituted a no smoking policy, which all firms subsequently started. Brent was an avid smoker. Marlboro's, if I recall correctly, too. Well, someone got a smoke detector, put it under the desk. Brent would always smoke and then stick it under the cigarette under the desk to somebody came into his office. Well, you know what happened. The alarms went off. Brent's dedication to our profession was exhibited by his participation and leadership in many professional associations. Some include chair of the Corporation and Securities section of the Illinois State Bar Association, chair of the committee, which assisted in the adoption of the new Illinois Supreme Court rule regarding liability of attorneys and practicing in Illinois, and of course, the Illinois State and our Peoria County Bar Association. Throughout his career, he was a statewide speaker on a variety of legal and business topics, and also spoke at numerous seminars for the Illinois Institute of Continuing Legal Education. Brent also held many leadership positions on community and philanthropic boards. He served as chair of the Tri-County March of Dimes, president of the Peoria High School Band and Orchestra Parents Club, president of the Peoria High School Boosters, the board of First Federal Church, and the board of the Country Club of Peoria. Brent was a man of faith. His strong Christian beliefs guided him in his personal and professional life. He always had a smile on his face, even during difficult times. He lost his first son, Kurt. He then battled cancer and developed various infirmities as he aged. Yet, he was always gracious, warm, and a pleasure to be around. Brent dearly loved his wife of 57 years, Judy, and their family. He and Judy would host many get-togethers for their children, Kurt, Todd, Brad, and Ryan this year. He loved being with his sons, their wives, and their grandchildren. Brent is and will be missed by those who are fortunate to have had him touch their lives. Personally, I had the pleasure of being his partner for over 40 years. In addition to being a consummate attorney, he was a joy to be with, both in the office and away. He was blessed with a warm personality and a great sense of humor. Therefore, be it resolved that the membership of the Peoria County Bar Association express our deepest sympathy and sorrow on the passing of our colleague and friend, Brent H. Willen, as well as our appreciation for his life, his dedication to the law, and his friendship. Be it further resolved that the Executive Director of the Peoria County Bar Association forward a copy of this memorial resolution to his surviving spouse, Judy, sons Todd, Brad, and Ryan. Further, that it be filed with the Peoria County Circuit Clerk, where it shall remain in perpetuity. Respectfully submitted this 25th day of May, 2023.
Thank you, Rex. The next memorial is presented for Julian E. Candle by Karen Scott.
To the family and friends of Julian Candle, members of the judiciary, Peoria County Bar Association, and guests. Judge Gorman, my colleague Brian Lee couldn't be here today, so I'm really pleased and honored to be able to present this in honor of Julian Candle. Julian was born in Chicago, Illinois on July 22nd, 1939 to Leslie and Leah Candle. His parents both had family in Peoria, so they moved from Julian to Peoria when he was very young. He graduated from Peoria High School in 1957, graduated from Radley University in 1961, and Northwestern Law School in 1964. He was on the law review and worked as a part-time proofreader, both contributing to his own excellent writing skills. While in Chicago, he met an English girl, Dorothy. They married in 1964. She was his perfect partner, patient with Julian's high energy and endless house projects, a devoted mother and grandmother, and as it turned out, a better writer than him. He was so proud of her success as a published mystery writer. Julian and Dorothy moved to Peoria upon his graduation from law school. He joined Kavanaugh, Spelling, Sula, Frederick in 1964 as an associate, and later became a partner. It was the only firm he ever practiced with, retiring in 2006. I had the privilege of practicing with Julian for 26 years, and as his law partner for 20 of those years. Julian was not afraid to tackle any area of law: civil, criminal, litigation, government, business transactions. The quirkier the client, the needier the client, the more obscure the statutory and case law, the better. And he was never too concerned about being paid for his work. One of Julian's clients paid his fee by delivering a stack of frozen pizza to the office every Friday, where attorneys and staff alike would enjoy them over the weekend. After a while, we all tired of pepperoni, but Julian considered the client as having paid in full. He was president of the Peoria County Bar Association for the 1998-99 term. He loved his colleagues in the bar. He would offer sound legal advice not only to attorneys at the Kavanaugh firm, but he would also reach out to other lawyers in the community if he had heard about a case and thought he had wisdom to share. His favorite bar activity was the basketball law league and the unofficial softball law league. As he would often say, his high level of energy and enthusiasm made up for him being a skinny Jewish guy with little athletic talent. He served as a founding member of the board of directors of the neighborhood Covenant House of Peoria and provided the legal counsel to get that project built at its current downtown location. For retirement, he and Dorothy moved to the state of Maine, where the craggy coastline reminded Dorothy of England. Julian took a part-time job as an innkeeper, following in the footsteps of the TV fictional author and innkeeper, Bob Newhart. Julian never published his novel, but his friends enjoyed receiving his emails with humorous descriptions of building yet another house and getting along with the locals. When someone needed a helping hand, Julian's kindness and generosity shined. He was generous with his time, talents, and treasury to anyone who needed it, yet he had tireless energy to dedicate to his family, law firm, clients, colleagues, and friends, and complete strangers. Julian died on February 4th, 2023 at the age of 83 years. He is survived by his wife, Dorothy, their 4 children, Warren, Jason, Rachel, and Shayna, and many grandchildren. Therefore, be it resolved that the membership of the Peoria County Bar Association expresses our deepest sympathy and sorrow on the passing of our colleague and friend, Julian Cannon, as well as our appreciation for his life, his dedication to the law, and his friendship. Be it further resolved that the Secretary of the Peoria County Bar Association shall forward a copy of the memorial resolution to Dorothy Cannon. Respectfully submitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. The next memorial is presented for John C. Mulgrew by William R. Holgate.
May it please the court, assembled jurists, honored guests. John C. Mulgrew Jr. grew up in Paris, Illinois, where he became an Eagle Scout. He attended the University of Illinois, earning a bachelor's degree in 1962. He went on to law school at Illinois, where he excelled academically, was a member of the Law Review, and was selected for Order of the Coif. John was admitted to the Illinois Bar in October 1964. Immediately following law school, John became a clerk to Justice Robert Underwood on the Illinois Supreme Court. In 1967, John began the private practice of law in Peoria, and he continued that practice for decades. John's practice was limited to civil litigation at the trial and appellate court levels. His practice was wide-ranging, but his specialty was tort claims of all kinds. There were many fine civil litigators in Peoria and Central Illinois. During the time John practiced, there were few, if any, that had John's enthusiasm for the practice of law. For John, the practice of law was an intellectual exercise that he thoroughly enjoyed. Apologies to the non-lawyers in the audience. Some legal context is required to understand John's practice. Strict liability and tort for defective products first became part of Illinois law in 1965. That's when John was clerking at the court. In the years that followed, concepts of implied indemnity or active passive indemnity were largely superseded by contribution among joint tortfeasors. Contributory negligence became comparative fault. These developments in the law interacted with each other and with the workers' compensation system. At the same time, in the early part of John's career, the modern rules of civil cases, the modern rules of discovery in civil cases were evolving. John thrived as a lawyer in this environment. There were numerous new, novel, and difficult issues to be analyzed and briefed. John had a comprehensive knowledge of the developing law. He read all the cases and analyzed the new legislation. He had views on every issue, which he freely shared and was confident were correct. John was not just an intellectual. He had an active docket of cases, many notable, which he vigorously pursued, whether representing plaintiffs or defendants. One example was an appeal he was handling in the late 1970s when I first met him. He represented a railroad that was subject to a $1.87 million adverse jury verdict arising out of a catastrophic derailment. Judge Pucci had instructed the jury on strict liability and negligence theories and refused to rule on assumption of risk as a matter of law by the railroad preceding the allegedly defective railroad car that caused the derailment. John had learned as much as a lawyer could learn about railroad interchange agreements and design and repair of railroad cars or railroad car wheel bearings. John's theory of the case was that strict liability was inapplicable to the activity of railroads interchanging freight cars, and that the receiving railroad assumed the risk of problems with bearings on freight cars received through an interchange agreement. John worked tirelessly on the appeal and was so focused on it that it was difficult to avoid hearing all about it when one saw him. John's theory of the case was vindicated by an outright reversal on appeal. The disappointed plaintiff then sought and failed to obtain review in both the Illinois and United States Supreme Courts. It then filed a complaint in federal court seeking to regain its lost verdict. After the district court dismissed that complaint, an appeal was made to the Seventh Circuit. When John rose for oral argument of that appeal, the panel of judges waved him off, briefly consulted, and ruled in favor of John's client from the bench. Despite winning, John was disappointed that he did not have the opportunity to excoriate his opponent. That would not have been a personal attack, however, but rather a criticism of the use of inappropriate legal theories. John was a zealous advocate, but his opposition to lawyers on the other side of the case was always intellectual and based on the law, never personal. John had considerable success as a litigator. That success was based on thorough preparation, regardless of who the client was or what was at issue. He left no stone unturned and sought to learn everything that there was to know about the other side's case and witnesses. John was skilled in the effective use of discovery procedures. Propounding and responding to civil discovery requests is often regarded as boring, but John recognized its importance and was always thorough in making requests and responses. One example of John's thoroughness in deposition preparation occurred in a serious personal injury case where the plaintiff retained an expert from Harvard Medical School. In the days before Amazon or even the internet, John managed to quickly obtain 2 copies of the expert's treatise addressing the subjects of his expert opinions. That was typical of John's approach to pretrial preparation. John loved talking about the law on all occasions, but there were 2 subjects that could divert his attention elsewhere. The first was good restaurants, and the second was college athletics. I traveled throughout central Illinois with John to attend various court, discovery, and other events. No matter where we went, John always knew the best restaurant in town. If we ended up in some burg that did not have a satisfactory establishment, John knew the route to take back to Peoria that went by a suitable restaurant. When circumstances brought John to Chicago or St. Louis, he was like a kid in a candy store choosing where to eat. John enjoyed discussing college athletics, particularly the University of Illinois football and basketball teams. The performance of those teams and when a particular coach, athletic director, or both should be fired provided endless fodder for conversation. Combining both of those non-legal interests, John told me that the ideal fall Saturday involved attending an Illinois football game and then going out for a good meal. The football was not always good, but John made sure that the food was. The camaraderie of other lawyers was important to John, and he appreciated the opportunities for that provided by the Peoria County Bar Association. Therefore, be it resolved that the membership of the Peoria County Bar Association express our deepest sympathy and sorrow on the passing of our colleague and friend, John C. Morgan Jr., as well as our appreciation for his life, his dedication to the law, and his friendship. Be it further resolved that the Secretary of the Peoria County Bar Association shall forward a copy of this memorial resolution to his son, John C. Mulgrew III, and his sister, Elizabeth Smith Camp, respectfully submitted this 25th day of May, 2023.
Thank you, Bill. The next memorial is presented for Timothy J. Newland by Ambrose V. McCall.
Thank you, David. May it please the court, members of the judiciary, Peoria County Bar Association, and guests, and most importantly, the family and friends of all the people being honored today. I'm very privileged to speak today to Timothy J. Newland, born on December 2nd, 1952, departed March 24, 2023. Just want to share a few memories with you and remarks about my favorite law partner, Timothy J. Newland. You should know I am certainly biased. Why? Tim was my role model from the first day I associated with him in 2006 at Hinshaw and Culbertson. Tim attended and was a proud graduate of the 1970 from Peoria High School. In 1974, he received an undergraduate degree in political science from Southern Methodist University in Dallas, Texas. He continued his education there and earned a Juris Doctor degree in 1977. While he was a law student, Tim ran and won an election for student body president at SMU and served in that capacity in 1976 through 1977. To those who knew Tim, they will not be surprised by his quotes from April 6, 1976 in the SMU student newspaper, The Daily Campus. Quote, "I wanted to be president of the student body to serve all the schools, not any specific interest group. We're here to work with the administration to make SMU better, but we also have to have an outspoken student government, an organized way for students to be heard." The same article says that Tim donated the stipend he would have received as student president to the endowment fund of Southern Methodist University. No surprise again that Tim received an M award, the letter M. That means a lot at SMU. It's one of the highest awards a student or faculty member can receive for their accomplishments and service. 8 years later, December 2nd, 1985, Tim married the love of his life, Lori Shepard, thereafter now known as Lori Newland, at St. Mary's Cathedral in downtown Peoria. Tim and Lori have 4 wonderful children: Tim Newland, Aberdeen, Maryland; Joel Newland, Peoria; Zach Newland of Peoria; and Libby Bono of Peoria. They have amazing grandchildren: Henry, Andrew, and Jude Newland. So then Tim forged a career with his law degree on behalf of clients in many industries. He practiced in real estate, family, personal injury, workers' compensation, product liability, probate, toxic torts, creditors' rights matters, and insurance claims defense. He was an assistant vice president at National City Bank, now part of PNC Bank, where he worked as an attorney in estate settlement. And before joining and becoming a partner at Hinshaw & Culbertson, Tim previously worked in Illinois state and federal courts and agencies as an attorney at Cassidy Miller. During that time, thereafter, Tim had his practice at Hinshaw & Culbertson. He was selected by his peers as a leading lawyer in personal injury defense law and workers' compensation defense. He earned an AV peer review rating from Martindale Hubbell. That's the highest rating for ethics and legal ability. He was reported in the Chicago Lawyer magazine as a top lawyer in Illinois. So he used his 40 years of experience in business, litigation law, defense of workers' compensation on behalf of many great clients he had, including Walsh Construction, OSF Healthcare System, including its hospitals, St. Francis Medical Center, St. Mary's Hospital. And one of our mutual partners is Renee Schroeder. She worked on workers' compensation cases along with Tim. She was out in the Rockford office for years. And as soon as I told her about Tim's passing on, she wrote to the entire firm that Tim was truly a gentleman, liked and respected by all that knew him, and that he will be dearly missed. But Tim had a big life outside the law, too. He was a board member of Crime Stoppers, Lutheran Ministries, Southside Mission. He served as an officer, president, director of Neighborhood Watch, Peoria Leadership Prayer Breakfast, St. Philomena PTO, Rotary Club of Peoria, and West Point Parents Club. This guy didn't even have a digital calendar throughout his practice. I don't know how he did it. And you see his little black book, you would run there. Oh, I have to go to Autism Speaks. I have to go to Peoria Girls Sports League. I have to go to Peoria Youth Boys Basketball. And even from 2011 onward, until he stopped his active practice, he was a big brother for kids who really needed and benefited from his help. He also did public service. He was appointed the public administrator, public guardian in 2011, held that post for several years. January 2017, he was appointed an at-large member of the Peoria City Council. And Mayor Rita Ali publicly stated about Tim's service, quote, "During that time, Tim served passionately and productively," end quote. I haven't seen her describe any other member of the Horseshoe in that capacity, even in his brief service on it. That's incredible. So he left a large legacy that was shown in his visitation after his courageous battle with cancer. There were people from all walks of life, beyond the judges, the state and local legislators, prosecutors, and public defenders, who would only show up at some of our services to make sure we were gone. They were there just talking about him, sharing about him. But there were people from all walks of life, from his neighbors, his church groups, and other folks in his social service group. So I had to think about what stood at his core, and it was his faith. And it was not only his daily mass attendance or deep involvement in his church. His faith was done through connecting people. By that, I mean he would connect people who had never encountered each other to work on projects for the betterment of Peoria and all its citizens. And he succeeded. But let's not forget, he was not a zealot. He never preached to me. He knew that would work, but he never did. What he did was he led by example, one person at a time. And he knew how to have fun. If there was any laughter in the office, Tim was always either creating it or in the center of it. And I should have known, and I'm going to use the word reportedly. Remember, when attorneys use the word reportedly, it means I don't have sworn testimony to this effect. But I understand that beyond his youth baseball and basketball, He also competed in disco dancing competitions. I have a trophy or two somewhere stored. I'm not surprised again. He could always bust. And Tim used that joyful spirit in his long service as a precinct committee person for the Peoria County Democrats. He loved to try out policies and thoughts, not people, not personalities, on people who didn't think like him. Because he wanted all of us to use logic and reach our own conclusions based on verifiable data and recognizing each other's personal policy preferences. He wanted a better outcome for everyone. So he will be missed by all who know him. And I will think of him as a guide when making hard choices or tough decisions, as I did before. So be it resolved, membership of the Peoria County Bar Association express our deepest condolences, sorrow, sympathy on the passing of our colleague and friend Timothy J. Newland, our appreciation for his well-lived life, his dedication to the law, his community, his family, and his friendship. And be it further resolved that the Secretary of the Peoria County Bar Association forward a copy of this memorial resolution to Lori Newland, his wife, and his children, Tim, Joel, and Libby, and that he join the constellation of all the folks we've honored today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambrose. That concludes the formal presentation of memorials. I'm sure that the families of those whom we honor are gratified by the appreciation we show to our departed comrades in the practice of law and the administration of justice. In accordance with the traditions of this event, I conclude with the balance of John Donne's poem, No Man is an Island. Each man's death diminishes me, for I am involved in mankind. Therefore, send not to know for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. This brings us to the part of this memorial service which is the most fun. We open the floor to anyone and everyone to express their recollections of our departed members and their appreciation for the friendship which they had. I always like to open, and this year in particular, because I knew everyone that we honor. I was very close with 6 of the 7. Bob Miller was a little bit ahead of me, but he and I would kid each other about the rounds of golf, because one year we tied for the low gross in the Peoria County Bar Association event, and it was at his course out at Mount Holly. We are all particularly blessed, and as I look back at coming up on 60 years of practice here in another 3 years, and I take this into account with what Bill Coltates said about John Mulgrew. There's never a day that I don't come to the office with enthusiasm for the profession that we have been called to practice, and for the people, the lawyers and the judges with whom we share that privilege. Looking back at Jack Teplitz, he was my neighbor. Last year, 3 of the people we remembered were lawyers with whom I had taken cases to verdict over the years. This year, 6 of the 7 are people with whom I had close friendships. Jack Teplitz was my neighbor when we lived in the Knolls. I knew Jack and his daughter Elena and the family then, and we were, as neighbors are, good friends. I would point out here, and it wasn't said, and I was somewhat surprised by those presenting the memorials for Brent and for Tim Newell, that those of us who were dyed-in-the-wool Cardinal fans lost two of our strongest supporters in the community. And Julian Cannell, when Louise and I came back to town in 1966 to start practice, I started with the Kavanaugh firm, and we lived in Wardcliffe. There weren't many places you could rent, and Wardcliffe was one of them, and we had a duplex, and Julian and Dorothy had just lived catty-corner in an apartment. So I would ride down to the office with Julian every day, and as I recall, in his Volkswagen. John Mulgrew and I, what was said about John, I share, because he and I, coming over the same years, dealing with the same evolutionary principles of law, would get together and talk endlessly about new statutes, comparative fault, strict liability, what impact it is going to have. And while we didn't always agree, we enjoyed the conversations immensely. And I miss him. And Tim Newland. Those of you who have a few years can remember his father, Jackson P. Newland, who was an associate judge here in Peoria County. And Jack Newland was my father's personal lawyer. So the Newlands were family friends. Little known fact that Tim's grandparents on his mother Joyce's side also had the florist shop that used to be in the Lehman building before it burned. So I would see his grandfather and grandmother every day as I would go to the office and take the elevator up in the Lehman building. I could go on about almost everyone, but I want to open the floor so that those of you who also have memories of each of these marvelous colleagues can share them with the open floor. Yes, John.
John Fleming. Well, I have to pass on a few personal thoughts about Dan Schmidt. Many here know Dan and remember him well. And I talked to his son, Matt, who sits right here ahead of time. I go, we all heard these, what we call like Dan witticisms, Danisms, okay? I called through this morning about 5:30. I go, I want to pass a couple on, but I guess I want to do I had to call through the ones that aren't so clean before. Dan had a passion for the law, which was great. That and Dan's kind of direct and bluntness really drew me to it. Here's one of Dan's witticisms, and I share it both with judges and with attorneys that are here. Dan was somewhat self-deprecating, but he was pretty confident in what he said. This was one of the statements he made many times, whether he was coming back from a ruling from court or whether he was from arguing with another judge or a deposition with a doctor. Whether he was liked it or not, Dan came back and go, well, how'd it go? And Dan goes, right or wrong, he goes, well, John, we both know even a broken clock is right twice a day. That was kind of summed up Dan. But anyway, thank you to his family for being here, Maureen, Matthew, who's beloved, and Steve, who probably heard these witticisms from when he was a little kid growing up with Dan.
You. Yes.
I would just, I'm Patrick Godwin, I was John Mulgrew's stepson. And I just wanted to show up today and congratulate you. You're very well-spoken and congenial, very solid, able, disciplined, which is what we need in the world today, is this body right here. And I want to thank John for imparting a lot of those lessons in me, that ethical, honest, straightforward, and enthusiasm, as you said. I didn't appreciate him as vocally as I should have back then. He was a lot different than my father, but casting my eye around the room, I really see all the quality and professionalism that he also showed. So thank you all.
Thank you. I'm sure that is appreciated by all of us and by John as well. Charlie?
This may be the Schmidt area, but I think there are few words that perhaps indicate my conversations with him. First of all, he was approachable. Many of us are not. He was dedicated. He was grounded. And he was forceful. With those characteristics, you had a great attorney in practice. Another attorney I want to mention, which you have already, Julian. Julian was a partner in our firm, the Kavanaugh firm, which has now been absolved. And he and I differed frequently on a number of items. But he was also very direct, brutal to a point sometimes, and consistent in his approaches. All good things which make good attorneys, and which we perhaps share. He will be missed. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
I want to say a few words about Dan Schmidt. Dan was my longtime friend and mentor and boss. And I actually met Dan about a year after I came to Peoria and started practicing law here at the skip committee practice. And I was actually in, I think, a discussion with John Peoria. And I think memory serves correctly, we were arguing a little bit about the merits of the sexual harassment case against the city, because I was working there at the time. And we were having a debate about the merits of it, and Dan walked over, and I think that impressed him, that I was taking the opposite side than he would think. Well, later during that time, during the skip practices, he learned that I had defended 2 Peoria cops in an excessive force case in a jury trial. And he thought, wow, that's somebody I think I might want to work with. So about a month later, he came to me and he was starting his firm with Kathy Moulton and asked me to come work for him. So I did. So over the years, I worked for him, and something that a lot of people don't realize about Dan, because they all know he's funny, he's very conservative, he's a talker, a joker. He also has a big heart. And something that I tell people about a lot, during the time that I worked for Kathy and Dan, my dad was very sick. He had pulmonary fibrosis, and he was waiting for a lung transplant. And Dan made sure that I covered every case that we had that was up towards the Chicago area, whether it was in Cook County, DuPage County, Lake County. He had me cover it so that I could leave and spend the rest of the day with my dad. And then when my dad got home, he let me be up in Chicago with him for 6 weeks while he was there recovering, still paying me. And we were only a 3-person firm, but not enough people to cover everything we had to do. So I think that's a wonderful story about Dan. And those of you who know Dan, as well as I do, it's just something that they do. But Dan taught me a lot about the importance of law, the importance of people from all walks of life, connecting with them, keeping those relationships, And he taught me about the importance of family, and I know that was so important to him, Lorena, Matt, and Steve, and Trish. But, you know, he still continues to debate with me, political debates, for what he loves, and discussions, and you all know Dan and I were on two completely different sides of the political spectrum, but we were still good friends. And I just happened to look up his name in my text, because he still texted me over the years, and it was usually about some bonehead news that the Democrats made. You know, how can you still support them or something like that? But this was, he would also text me about things going on in the city while I was on the city council. And his last text to me was about something he disagreed that we were doing, I think, with the police chief that was forced to resign, and whether we should have that information. And his last line to me was something to the effect, now I can't find it, but I have it right here. He said, "I love you, but pull your head out of you know what." Anyway, I'm forever grateful that Dan was my friend, my mentor, my boss. And Peoria is a better place, the legal community, the judiciary, and everything, thanks to Dan.
So say we, all of us, for Dan and everyone else who has been remembered today. Oh, Judge McCluskey.
I know, everybody's going, oh my God, how long will you go? For all of us who are old, this is a quick story about Brent Willem will let us remember the old days. We had a case against each other, and I was on vacation in Florida, and I would call the office, and they would say, well, Brent Williams left a message for you. Okay, when I would call back to his office, and that went on for a whole week. And finally, I'm walking down St. Petersburg Beach. There's Brent. We're using the same payphone on the beach. No cell phone, no flip phone. We were using the same beach phone, and we had a great time, and we always talked about that. But that goes back and shows you how far, and we can all remember those days. Dan Schmidt asked me to speak at his swearing in as an appellate judge. And I don't remember what I said, but I do remember this. And Steve, were you there?
I had to work.
That's what I thought, because I asked if Steve was there. But your mother was there in a wheelchair. Now, the distance between Sparland and Chillicothe is about 8 miles. But your mother, Dan's mother, had me called to sit with her so she could tell me about my mother and aunt, who both grew up in Chillicothe, and they were all the same age. She was a hairdresser, and they both went to her to have their hair fixed. So I told Dan, I said, this is one of the best days of my life. I got a chance to meet your mom, and she told me stories about them growing up in Chillicothe. Now tell me why you asked me to speak. That's right, what I said. I just wanted to show everybody in that audience I had one bonehead Democrat. Anybody remember when we had the real skit? And put the red on. Why can't we have a little more of that? Or why can't we end up with a bar association like all the people and what's been spoken? I hope that some of this we could somehow get down to the young people who are, of course, practiced 20 years and they're not here. And then finally, both Tim Newland and Dan tried to stay in touch with on the telephone during their illness. Both of them never asked for self-pity. As long as they had breath, they could talk about practice of law and things that were going through their mind. Ambrose was shaking it, not pity. They love being lawyers, and to their last breath, enjoyed life.
If what you said, as I look out and see the age of the audience is troubling in the sense that I don't know where the younger lawyers are that come to it with the enthusiasm that all of us have shared for these many years. And I don't know what the association is going to be like, let alone this tradition in another 8 or 10 years when you have lawyers who would be remembered and no one interested in remembering them. That's an observation that I have had and have come to over the past 3 or 4 years. So I think we have somewhat of an obligation to get out there and to try to instill the enthusiasm that all of us have in those who are coming behind us, because they do stand on, they'll stand on our shoulders as we have stood on those who have gone before.
I can't help it, Dave, I have to say something. Dave said earlier that, my name is Kevin Lyons. Dave said earlier that he hasn't remembered a day that he hasn't come to work excited and invigorated. I do have a few of those days. And it was 1996, and I had been the state's attorney for 2 terms already. And a person wanted to run against me and announced it on Dateline. And I was in Georgia when I saw it. Fast forward, it was one heck of a year. He people thought I liked attention. This person, named after a famous bank, liked a lot of attention. And when I came back, he had filed, but he didn't really live where he said he lived. In fact, he didn't really live anywhere. And so the address that he had, I was much younger, but I thought I was the king of castles. And the address that he put on his petitions was a totally vacant apartment on Knoxville. Totally vacant. How do I know? Because I had someone take some pictures of it. Inside, totally vacant. Nothing, not a stick of furniture. So I thought, well, my purpose is to get him off the ballot. That always works. And so I said, I need somebody to advance my cause. This person is not qualified. He should not be on the ballot. I need a lawyer that has the passion and the vigor and the quirkiness to take my case and think like me. Somebody said, you need Julian Kemp. And I said, who is Julian Kemp? And then I met him, and I said, yes, he meets all those things. He had a little stocking cap on, it was in the winter. We filed something. We go to court, we had a judge that didn't see it our way, but it didn't really matter because Julian said what I thought should be said, and he said it with vigor, a little quirky, and he would shoot down the person who wanted to be the center of attention. And even though that person stayed on the ballot, I was thrilled that somebody stood at the threshold and said what needed to, by God, be said. And I said, Julian, I'll take it. He was a wonderful guy.
Yes.
Can I just say a little something? As one of the younger members of the Peoria Bar, compared to this season. I hope that we do carry on this tradition, but my name is Fraser Satterley. I served as Dan Schmidt's law clerk from one of his boneheaded liberal law clerks, actually, from 2012 to about 2015. He married my husband and actually in his office here in Illinois, and his wife and his son Matt, who have become wonderful friends, were in attendance. But he, one of my favorite days, just very quickly, was we were arguing about a criminal case. It was a DUI. I can't remember all the specifics because we did a lot. But I think the cops had followed someone home and then had gone into the house. At any rate, Dan and I went back and forth and back and forth. We disagreed a lot. But in this particular instance, I just wouldn't let it go. And he looked at me and said, Fraser, let's pretend I'm the judge. And so I took my little file back and I wrote it up the way that he wanted. And sometimes I was willing to admit that he was right on these things. Never on that one. I always disagree with him on that one. We talked about it a lot. But I just think I would be remiss if I didn't say that Dan single-handedly changed the trajectory of my legal career. And I wouldn't be where I am now had he not taken a chance on me back in 2012. So we miss him. And I love his family and they're wonderful friends. So thank you.
Carry it forward. I will conclude with one further observation about my good friend Brent Willem. Every year we would see each other and spend a great deal of time congratulating ourselves on our impending joint birthday. We were both July 28th. And I think David Sin shared that with us as well. And the first time that I really got to know Brett, and he had just started, I was coming back from a deposition, and Lyle Allen was giving me a ride back. And Lyle turned to me and said, you know, we're very high on that young kid, Brent Willem. So think about it that many years ago. Good times past, good times lie ahead. And speaking of lying ahead, there's a reception across the street for those who would care to come and share some less formal remembrances. Thank you very much.
Court is adjourned. Thank you all for coming.